So welcome back. I hope you had a good weekend. So today we're shifting gears yet again. The class moves fast. We are done with Illustrator for now. We will come back to Illustrator again in a little bit, but we're going to move into the world of AutoCAD. And I have to tell you early on in this that it's not possible for me to teach you all there is to know about AutoCAD in 2 or 3 weeks. It just doesn't work. So AutoCAD is a kind of a fundamental building staple of the architecture world and or the design world in general. Anything that ends up being a physical product generally goes through AutoCAD at some point. There are alternatives in terms of drafting and certainly directions that we may be going with BIM management and that sort of thing. But AutoCAD still somehow is always just this staple that everybody has to know. So that being said, it is definitely worth your time to take an AutoCAD class. While it might not be the most enthralling, exciting class, it's still kind of just one of those fundamental things that you have to know. I used to teach Vectorworks in this class at Daniel's prodding. Truth be told, I hated it. It's not my favorite program in the world, but I taught it for a while, and it's fine. And it has its purpose, but I think you guys, if you learn at least a little bit of AutoCAD, you're far better off than learning a little bit of Vectorworks. So for a long time, I pushed to be able to teach at least a bit of AutoCAD in this class. Finally, was able to do that. So the AutoCAD isn't as well developed as I'd like it to be. There's not a lot of tutorials written. I'm working on those. You'll probably see a bunch of them pop up this year. At least that's the hope. But I will definitely go through and demonstrate a lot of it in lecture format, so you'll see a lot of it, and we'll talk through it. My goal out of this AutoCAD section is so that you're familiar enough with it so that you could, for example, create a laser cut file and go laser cut something for a 121 or something like that. I also want you to be comfortable enough to get decent drawings out of your AutoCAD. And then we'll ultimately throw some of the AutoCAD drawings back into Illustrator and do a little bit of collaging or diagramming over the top of them. So it's meant to be an integral part, but it's not meant to be completely holistic in terms of you'll be an expert in AutoCAD. Industry standard is still, while there are a lot of companies that are moving toward Revit, industry standard is still AutoCAD. If you're going to get a job working in an architecture firm, chances are they're going to want to make sure you know AutoCAD. It's very unusual for it not to be an AutoCAD-based practice. So it's certainly something to be aware of. So we're going to start with exercise 120 today, which is your kind of fundamentals introduction to AutoCAD. I'm going to spend a fair amount of time going through kind of the interface and how AutoCAD works, and then we'll do a simple floor plan on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and open up AutoCAD 2015. I don't know whether you guys have 2015 or 2016. As the computers are updated, sometimes you get the updated version. It really makes no difference whether you're in 2015 or 2016. There's very little that's different about it. So as I open up AutoCAD, I get this first kind of splash screen, recent documents, get started, etc. We're going to come up here to the upper left corner, and there's a button for New, and we'll click on New. Yeah? Give me a second to look at what you get. Oh, of course, right? Okay, so yeah, this is great when mine doesn't match what yours is, right? So click on the new document. It should be the blank white little thing, right? And then it asks you for your units. Imperial feet and inches is what you're going to want. And then go ahead and say OK. Let me just take a quick look. I hate it when my computer doesn't match yours because it makes it so much more challenging. Okay, that's fine. And of course, half of them are different too. You've got to love it. Okay. So I apologize that some things are different. If you did not get that initial screen where you could pick units, you do want to make sure you specify units. The easiest way to get there is by just typing units. It's also under the, I always forget, it's under Format, Units, and you want to make sure that your unit type is architectural. And I'll go ahead and say OK when that's done. And I apologize that everybody's is slightly different. If you don't have a grid in the background, it's not the end of the world. We'll get to that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and talk through the interface a bit. AutoCAD has the capability of working in 3 dimensions, though everything that I'm going to teach you in this class has just 2-dimensional. So if we look over here in the right corner, we see kind of this compass-looking thing. Right now it says top, and it should say top. We're going to stay with it in top the whole time. Right? We're never going to move into 3D. If I were being honest about it, if you were trying to do 3D in AutoCAD, I'd say, why aren't you using Rhino? Because it's a far superior program to be doing 3D. So we'll just take 136 and we'll talk about it then. Okay? So we're going to work primarily in the top view. And so I want to kind of explain a few things about the interface of AutoCAD. AutoCAD has 3 different ways of interacting with it. You have a regular menu structure, like the File menu, the Edit menu, the things you're used to, same thing in Illustrator. It has a bunch of toolbars, right? And then it has something called the command line. And you can work and interact with AutoCAD in any of those 3 ways, and a lot of times you can do one command in 3 different ways. And so as you get faster, you'll find that using the command line is the faster way of interacting with it. And as you start to memorize certain commands, you'll get used to it. In the meantime, when you're first learning, you'll probably do a lot of hunting and pecking on the toolbars in terms of picking icons. So when I explain things, I will try to show you the toolbars where you pick it, the menu structure where to pick it, and also the type in commands. Okay? And it's just going to vary as you go forward. So up here at the top, we have our standard menu commands, our file and our edit, etc. A lot of the stuff that you're going to need are listed under these. Right? Draw is a big one. Right? It's where a lot of the drawing tools reside. Modify is also a big one. It's where a lot of the other tools that you'll be using reside. Below the standard menu structure here, we have a ribbon that has a lot of tools that are used frequently. The home ribbon is kind of the most common tools used from all the major categories. And so for most of what we're doing, being on the home ribbon is kind of the right strategy. So under home, we have drawing, right? A section marked draw, and those are the primary shapes. Then we get to modify, right? These are the primary modifying commands. Notice that these correspond with the draw menu and the modify menu, right? Annotation is for things like dimensions and text. We will very unlikely we'll cover anything from this. It's a little bit more of an advanced topic, right? The next option over here is something called layers. Layers work very similar to layers in Illustrator or InDesign, but we'll work with layers. Blocks we won't touch in this class because they're a little bit more complicated, right? Properties we will discuss, and this has to do with what do things look like, colors, line weights, line types, etc. Right? And then we get to the kind of the trickle down measure, kind of utilities, grouping objects, clip, cut, paste, etc. Okay? So the bulk of what we'll be doing is right over here in that ribbon. There are also a bunch of other tabs, right? Say, let's pick annotate, for example, that give us a far more expanded view of how annotations work and what options we have relating to annotations, instead of just the small set of annotation that's available in the home menu. Right? So this is just more extensive. If we were dealing with blocks, we go to the insert menu. So these are just more extensive sets of tools. But like I said, for the most part, we'll be dealing with home, and that's fine. Okay? Below that, we have 2 tabs listed here, New Tab and Drawing 1. Those are both views that we're looking at or files that we're looking at. And we can have more tabs if we wanted them as we go forward. Okay? This black area is the primary drawing space that we're going to be working with in AutoCAD. AutoCAD's a little bit different than the other major programs that we've worked with because you get a black background and you draw in white. The reason that you draw on a black background with white lines is because people that tend to work in AutoCAD stare at the computer for many, many hours, and your eyes adjust and are easier. It's easier to work with a black background with white lines. So it has to do visually, not tiring out your eyes quite as much. Okay, that's why we work on a black background. When you go to print, black and white are inversed. Right? Other colors stay the same. Black and white are opposite. So if I went to print something, it would show up with black lines on a white background. Okay, it's just something to get used to. It's a little bit different. But again, it's to help you in looking at your screen for such a long period of time. Okay, as we continue down here at the very bottom, and for some of you this is actually docked at the bottom. Some of you it floats like this. It makes no difference whether it's docked or float. If the docked view looks something like this, right, where it sits down at the bottom, the floating view is a little stripe that goes across the page. Doesn't make any difference. This is something that's called the command line. And the command line is a very critical way of interacting, certainly the fastest way of interacting with it, with AutoCAD. And that is that you can actually key with the keyboard, type in commands, or you can type in values. And so we're going to spend time exploring that today, and you'll get used to it. The faster you are in AutoCAD, the more stuff happens on the command line. Right? If you've worked in Rhino or if you've taken 136, you're very familiar with the command line. Same thing is in Rhino that is in AutoCAD. And so we'll keep an eye on this, and I'll explain it a little bit more as we go along. At the very bottom here, we have a couple tabs. These have to do with layouts and what paper space versus model space. I'll explain that far better as we go forward in the class, because I think it's something really important to understand, but you don't need to worry about it for right now. Right? And then over here on the right, it could be centered on your screen. It just depends on what the layout looks like. These are a bunch of little shortcuts to turn things on and turn things off. Right? The first one here is grid. Do I want to display the grid or turn the grid off? So you can see, I know it's on the projector, it's a little hard to see. I can turn it on and turn it off. Right? We also have snap mode. Do I want to turn, it's called grid snap. Do I want to snap to these points or not? Right? I'm going to leave that off. As we come over here, we have a little kind of right angle icon. That means, do I want to restrict myself to only draw at 90 degrees, which can be useful. Right? As we continue forward over here, I'm going to glance over a couple and jump to this blue square with a green dot in one corner. Right? That's called object snap. And what object snap does is it snaps to objects. So if I want to start at a corner of an object, I can snap to that. And we'll explain this a little bit more as I start to draw. The snaps are available specifically with this little triangle next to it, which lets me choose. Right now I have endpoint, center, intersection, and extension on. Right? I tend to like to have perpendicular on too, out of habit. But we'll talk through what these mean as we go forward. But those should stay on, highlighted in blue. Okay. As we come over here, let's see. The rest of this kind of doesn't matter. Now, I need to turn off the dynamic input, which I believe is this one. Hold on. I gotta love it because these things always change and the icons change. So I have to find it. Hold on. Is it this one? Oh, dynamic input is off by default. That's interesting. No, it's still on. Hold on a second. There it is. Okay, so that's gotta love this, right? So the tool that I wanted you to turn off is hidden now in AutoCAD 2015. So click on the little three lines at the very end here, and there's a check. There shouldn't be a check mark next to dynamic input. Go ahead and check the dynamic input button, right? And then it's this icon right here. It's the plus with the little rectangle below it. We're going to turn that off for a little while. And I do this on purpose because I want you to learn something that dynamic input makes it easier to deal with. But I think it's important that you learn it first. So I'm going to make sure dynamic input is actually off, which it is now. And then I'm going to go ahead with that off, and we're going to start. Okay? So AutoCAD works just like Rhino in a mathematical system. Okay, so you guys remember back to the early stages of maybe algebra when you had to graph functions on a piece, an XY grid, right? And there was like a slope, and you drew a line. And you guys vaguely remember that a little bit? I know it's been a long time, right? AutoCAD works very much the same way in that we have a coordinate system that's defined that we can use. Okay, and you see down here, sorry, behind my head, there's a little icon for X and Y. There's also a green axis and a red axis, right? Those are indicative of points on a grid, right? So this point right here, at the very bottom, is point 0, 0, right? Everything going in this direction is positive X. Everything going in this direction is positive Y. So if we pick the Polyline tool right here, right, which is available under the Home tool, right there, right? I can type in a value for where I want my line to start. So, for example, I can type in 0, 0. And if we look right here at the Polyline, right, I clicked on Polyline, it says P-line, specify start point, and I'm typing in 0, 0, right? And on the little handouts that I give you, when I type in a value, I try to make it in the Courier font like a typewriter, so you know I'm typing it in. Okay? So I've typed 0, 0, and I'm going to go ahead and hit Enter. And you see that my line starts right here at that point 0, 0. Okay? Now I'm going to use something called an absolute coordinate, which is a coordinate as if I were on an XY grid, right, to type in the next value. So I want a line that goes up, straight up, 24 feet, right, and no in the X direction. So I'm going to type 0, 24, and then I'm going to put the little apostrophe in to mark feet. And I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And of course it goes off the page, right? So I'll go ahead and hit Enter one more time, and then I have to zoom extents, which probably is available somewhere. I always type zoom. I'm going to go to View, Zoom, Extents. There we go. And so now I have a line that's right there that goes from 0, 0 up to 0, 24. Right? If I continue with the Polyline tool, I'm going to start there. Now, notice because I had to hit Enter an extra time, right, I wasn't active in the command anymore. Right? So I had no active command. When I click on Polyline and I move my cursor over the top of the line, see how it gets that green box around it? That green box is an object snap, and it's going to make sure that when I click on this point, it's going to snap directly onto the end of that line. If I didn't have the object snap on, go ahead and turn that off for a second, and I went to try to get close, right? I don't get that little green dot, and even if I visually say, yeah, that looks really close, and I click, if I were to zoom in, you see that they're really not on top of each other, right? Even if I zoomed in and I said I'm going to go right there, right? As I zoom in more, guess what? They're not on top of each other, right? Where if instead I have object snap on and I start on Polyline, the closer I get to it, the more I know that it's exactly on that point. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out. And now I'm going to continue with these absolute coordinates. So now I want a line that goes over 12 feet. Right? So in absolute coordinates, it would be over 12 and then up 24. So I'd say 12 feet, 24 feet. And then Enter. And that then draws a line from this point over to that point. Okay, so again, it's absolute coordinates. So I just want to highlight this again, right? So this is point 0, 0 in space, 0, 0, right? I want to go up first to this point, and this point is going to be 0 because it's nothing in the X direction, and then 24 feet because it's up 24 feet. If I want to go to this point, it's going to be over 12 and then up 24. So this would be 12, 24. 12 feet, 24 feet. Right? So that then created a line. Draw my lines here. That's a horrible marker. there, and there. Okay? So these are what are called absolute coordinates. Relative coordinates, on the other hand, are relative to the last point that you clicked. Yeah? Let me take a quick look. Hold on. Oh, turn off the dynamic input. You have to turn it on. Yeah, it is. Anyway, you'll be good now. Okay, so relative coordinates are relative to the last point that you created. So instead of being relative to point 0, 0, down here at the origin, it's relative to the last point that I created. And this is a more common way of interacting with AutoCAD. So, for example, if I wanted to make a line that went down 6 feet, right, I would start the relative coordinate. I need to tell AutoCAD that it's relative. So I start with the @ sign. So it's like an email address, the @ sign. And then I say the direction, the amount I want in the x direction, which would be 0 feet. And then the amount in the y direction, which would be -6 feet, because I want to go down 6 feet. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. And that'll draw a line that's 6 feet long straight down. Now, if I wanted to draw over, right, this would be again, relative, 12 feet, positive x direction, right, comma, 0 feet in the y direction. And I get that point. So now I can continue, and I could say negative 0, comma, negative 12 feet, because it's going down in the y direction. And there's my next point. Right? Now I could switch back to relative coordinates, or excuse me, absolute coordinates. So this one would be 12 feet, comma, 6 feet. And I get that point. So it's a little bit of math in your head to go back and forth between the two. Right? And then this last one would be 12 feet, comma, 0 feet. There. And then I can finish off my shape. Get this. Okay? So this absolute and relative coordinate thing is an important distinction, because there will come a point in time where you need to be able to type in a value. And so I want to explain what the @ sign means, right, and what absolute and relative coordinates are. The truth is that more likely you're going to be drawing with dynamic input on. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that icon back on. And when I do that, I'm going to move over here to the right a little bit. You'll see that I get a crosshairs, but then I have some dynamic input that I can type in here. Okay? So if I were to turn off dynamic input, I no longer have that bar that I can put things in. So we'll put that in. Dynamic input, it says specify start point. I have 2 values. I could type in a value if I wanted to, or I can just click on the screen. And if I click on the screen, you see that now it's giving me a distance and an angle. Right? So I have those 2 things to be able to control what the line looks like. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn on my ortho, because I'm drawing straight lines. So I'm limited to just horizontal or just vertical. And now I can actually just specify the length of these lines. So I could say 24 feet, and it'll draw a line 24 feet. Now I can specify a length here, 12 feet. I can specify a length here, 6 feet. Notice I don't have to do positive and negative anymore. Okay, 12 feet, 12 feet, 12 feet, 6 feet, and I can come back to the start. So when I'm done, I'll hit enter. Notice that that was a whole lot faster to just type in the values and have the general direction. Okay? But chances are you're going to want dynamic input, and you're going to learn to draw that way. I just like to illustrate the point of the coordinate system, because there will come a point in time where the coordinates mean something. Okay? But for now, we're going to go ahead and leave dynamic input on. And so you can go ahead and draw your shapes. I'll do it one more time, just for the illustration of it. Right? We'll start again with the polyline. And this time I'm going to specify a start point by typing it in. So I'll type 0. And then I could do the comma and then 0. But when I type 0, notice that it's in the first box. When I hit comma or when I hit tab, it'll move to the second box. And I can type in 0. And then I'll hit enter. There it is at 0, 0. Now I'll type in the values, 24 feet, 12 feet, 6 feet, 12 feet, 12 feet, 12 feet, 6 feet, and then I just clicked at the end there. I could type 12 feet again. Okay? And so now I end up with the basics of the floor plan that's on the back of this sheet. Okay? This is an extraordinarily simplified floor plan. It's just giving you something to work on when you draw. Okay? So I now have a polyline that goes all the way around the outside of my object. I'd like to turn this into a set of walls, and I'm going to do that by using the offset command. And what the offset command does is it says take a line and make a copy of that line that's a certain distance from the line that I started with. Right? And so it's available up here in the Modify toolbars. It's the lowest one on the right corner. It's called Offset. I can also go to Modify and then Offset. If I can find it. There it is, Modify Offset. Or I can type Offset. Right? 3 different ways of initiating that Offset command. So if we look at my dynamic input or at the command line, you can see it says offset. Specify offset distance, right? Or through erase or layer. Okay? We're going to go ahead and specify the offset distance as being 6 inches. Now, of course, there's some debate. If we were in a technical construction class, walls aren't exactly 6 inches thick, but for what we're doing, 6 inches is fine. Okay? So I type in 6 followed by the quotation mark for 6 inches, and I'll go ahead and hit enter. Right? Then it says select object to offset. Okay? So I want to select my object, which you notice when I kind of mouse over it, it highlights, it glows a little bit. That's so I know which objects I'm clicking on. I'll go ahead and click on it, and then it's going to say specify point on side to offset. Okay? So do I want the offset to be on the inside of my line, or do I want it to be on the outside of my line? Okay? So I'm going to click either on the inside or on the outside. So in this case, I want it to be on the inside, so I'm going to click on the inside here. And I'll go ahead and click. And now I have 2 lines that go around this shape. So that was a really easy way of creating the double line for the walls. Okay? Next thing is I need to start adding the doors and the windows of the building, right? And this is where you start to just practice. Okay? So let's look. I'm going to add the door in the center at the top here. So I'm going to go back to Polyline, and I'm going to zoom in on the top here. Now I know that my door, right, if we look at the back here, the door is at the center. It's a 3-foot door in the center. Okay? So I need to find the center of these 2 lines. And so right now, I can't really find the center. I'd have to be guessing, or I'd have to measure, or something. Instead, I'm going to come down here to my object snap. Right? Click on the little triangle next to my object snap, and I'm going to turn on midpoint snap. And what midpoint snap does is it says, tell me where the middle of the line is, and let me start. So it gives me a little triangle, and it'll say midpoint. So now I'll go ahead and click where it says midpoint, and then I'll click where it says midpoint, and I'm done, so I'll hit enter on the keyboard. So now I have a line that's exactly halfway across this set of walls. Okay? I also know that my door is 3 feet, so let me use that offset command again. So I'll click on offset, and it's going to say specify offset distance. What's half of 3 feet? Right? 18 inches. Or 1 foot 6, depending on how you want to do it. So I'll go ahead and type in 18 inches. And now it says select object to offset. There's that little line. and I'll offset this way, and then I'll continue and offset that way. Okay? So now I'm done. I'll hit enter. And so I have one side of the door, and I have the other side of the door, right, over here. I also have a line here in the center that I don't need anymore, so I can go ahead and click on it, and then press the delete key on the keyboard, and that goes away. Okay, so I've established this as a door, but I need to get rid of this line and that line because the door is open. So I'm going to use a command that's called trim, right, which is available right here in my Modify tools under Trim. It's also under Modify and then Trim. Or again, you can type in Trim and then hit Enter. Okay? So then the Trim command says Select Objects or Select All. Okay? If I select all, it's the fastest way of selecting everything, but I don't need to select all the objects. I only need to select the objects that I'm directly working on. So I could, for example, select them individually, there, 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 and there, right? Or I could draw a box through them. And so this brings up a good opportunity to explain how AutoCAD selections work. Okay? So I have two different ways of selecting in AutoCAD, and the good news is that AutoCAD has done something to make it easy to see which selection method you're using. If I start anywhere on the left side and I draw a box, I get a blue rectangle, and anything completely contained within the blue rectangle will be selected. So if I drag it over these two lines, the two lines, there and there, will be selected, right? But this line and this line are not selected. Okay? If I start anywhere on the right side and I drag a box from the right, my selection is now green instead of blue. Okay? That means that anything this box touches will be selected. Right? So in this case, from right to left, I get all of the lines. So I get the horizontal lines and the vertical lines. Right? So there's two different ways of selecting, and it takes some practice to get used to which way is the right way. So I have those selected. I'll go ahead and hit Enter. Now it says Select Object to Trim. Right? So I'm going to click on right there, and it gives you this handy little red X that says this is going to go away. So I'll go ahead and click there, and I'll go ahead and click there. When I'm done, I'll hit Enter. And now we can see that I have this door opening created. All right? I'll continue on and draw a little window. Right? So I have a window that's 1'6" from this corner, 1 foot from here. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my Polyline tool. And I'm going to move the mouse to this corner. Right? And I get a little perpendicular snap icon there. And as I drag the mouse, oh, come on. As I drag the mouse this way, see how I get a little green plus sign, and then I get a dotted line extending out this direction, right? What that's doing is it's allowing me to type in a value from this point, right? So I know I want to be over 1 foot, so I'll type 1 foot and then Enter. And my starting point for this line then becomes 1 foot from this point over, right? In the world of Rhino, it's called smart tracking. In AutoCAD, I forget exactly what they call it, right? And so then I'll go ahead and draw my line to here, and I'll hit Enter. Now I'm also going to do it another line at 1'6" from this corner. So I'm going to repeat this again. I'm going to start with the polyline. I'm going to move my mouse over that corner, and then I didn't click anything, but I just dragged the mouse over, right? And I get that little green plus sign and a dotted line. And then I'm going to type in 1'6". So 1'6" quotation mark. Right? And I'll go ahead and hit Enter. And now I have a line that's 1'6" from that corner. And I'll go ahead and draw it to there, and I'll hit Enter. Okay? So now I have this first window that's open. Okay? And I can go ahead and I can draw a polyline from the center here, and we can designate that as a window. Right? I could also get technical, and I could offset this piece of glass by maybe 1/4 of an inch and have one on the inside, one on the outside, and then I could get rid of the center just to add a little bit more detail to it. You don't have to. It depends on your level of AutoCAD. Okay? So I have this window here. Right? I need to have the same window on this side over here. Okay? So I can go ahead once again with the Polyline tool, and I can draw this. So we can go over by 1 foot. And then we can go over by 1 foot 6 inches and down. Okay? And then I could draw the lines again. Now, for me, that would take too long, and instead, what I would do is I would select, and again, I'm going to select from the left to the right to select everything contained within my object, not everything. There. And I'm going to use the mirror tool. So up here, there's a tool called mirror. And what mirror does is it says, take 1/2 and reflect it across a line. So I'll click on mirror, and it's going to say, specify first point of mirror line. So because I want this window to show up right here, right, I need a mirror line that goes right through the center of this door. But I can't click on the center of this door anymore, but I can click on the center down here. So I'll go ahead and click on the center down here, and I'll draw a line, and it's represented by that dashed line. And when I click, it's going to ask me, do I erase the source or do I keep the source? Right? By default, it's no. No, I want to keep the source. So it already says N for no. And I'll hit Enter. And now I have a copy of this window over here. So it's a much faster way of drawing this window in. Okay? I also, according to the plan on the back, have a window in this wall that's the same dimensions, and a window that's in this wall that are the same dimensions. So instead of just mirroring straight, I'm going to take this object, and I'm going to mirror it. Let me click on mirror. Right? But I'm going to mirror it across a 45-degree line. So you guys remember back in 130 when you were reflecting objects, right, around that 45-degree line? I'm doing the same thing here. Right? I'm going to mirror my object right there at 45 degrees. And we'll say no. And it's going to bend this object down over to here. So it's a much faster way of drawing it than to actually draw it. But of course, if that didn't seem to sit well with you, right, I can go ahead and I can draw it the same way. So I could go 1 foot 6 inches. Right? And then I could offset. This was 2 feet. That line there. And then we could come back and I could draw the line in the center. And then I could offset by 1/4 inch. I could do there. And there. And then I could delete it. So there's nothing wrong with drawing it again. It just takes more steps, a little bit more work, rather than using the mirror. Okay? So there's more to do. There's more lines to draw, etc. I'm going to turn you loose now to practice with this. Okay? Those of you that feel comfortable in AutoCAD, if this is boring for you, go ahead and change it. Right? You could chamfer a corner. I mean, there's lots of different things to do. Oh, the one other thing that can be useful is to join objects together. So see how that line is separate from this line and is separate from this line? If I select all of these lines and then type join or go to, I think it's under modify join, right? Those objects will now become one object, which can be useful. Okay? So I can select these as well, and then I can go up to join, modify join, or type join, and now those are one object instead of separate objects. Optional if you want to do it. Okay? So I suggest other commands like extend, fillet, chamfer, mirror, rotate. And so I'll show you a few of those just so that you know what they are. A fillet, what a fillet does is it takes two lines. All right, I'm going to move over here to the side so you can see this a little bit better. and a fillet puts a curve between the two lines. So if I type fillet, or I click on the fillet tool right here, right, the first thing that's going to ask me is to select the first object, or I have some options. And you can see the options listed here: undo, polyline, radius, trim, or multiple. Right? I'm going to type R for radius. The other thing I can do with this dynamic input on is, you see here it says select first object or, and there's this little kind of icon that's hard to see on the screen. It's a key for down arrow. So if I press the down arrow on the keyboard, I'll get a little shortcut of what my options are. And I can then use the down and up arrows to come and select radius and then hit enter. Okay? Or I can type R for radius. There's lots of ways of doing this. And so let's say I want a radius of 4 feet. When I select the first object here, and I select the second object, you see that it takes the two objects and it connects them together with an arc. Okay, that's a fillet. So once again, right, let me get rid of this. I have two lines. The lines can even go past one another. It doesn't matter. And if I click on fillet, I'll type R for radius, and let's say 2 feet this time. If I select the first line and then the second line, I'll get an arc between the two. Okay? So one of the tricks that I use very frequently when I'm drawing is, let's say that I have, let me turn off, say that I have two lines in space, something like that, and they didn't quite come together. If I want them to come together at a 90-degree angle, I'll do a fillet with a radius of 0, which basically says a 90-degree angle, and those two will come together as a 90-degree angle, right? Which is another, it's just a shortcut way of connecting lines together. I use that a lot when I'm drawing. But again, doesn't matter. So that's the fillet command. The chamfer command is essentially the same thing as a fillet, except that it creates an angle that connects the two, right? And so it's available not under the defaults that are set here. We'd have to go to modify and then chamfer. It's less common. It's right here, right? And it's going to say select first line, or again I have options, right? So this time instead of angle, it's going to be distance. So I'll type distance, and then it's going to say what's the first distance? I don't know, it's 1 foot. Second distance, we'll do 1 foot again. And now if I took this and I took this, it's going to put them together with a little angle. Right? I could do it for these lines. So I can click on this one, and then I can click on this one, and it'll again angle the two together. Okay? So that's chamfer. We already did mirror. We already did fillet. Extend. I don't know how common this will be. Extend would be if I had a line and I had some lines that were pointing toward it. Say something like that. And I wanted these lines to go to where they hit this line. I can type extend or go to modify extend. And it's going to say select objects or select all. So we'll select those objects. I'll hit enter. Then it says select object to extend. Right? You see when I put the mouse over it, it extends the object to meet the other object. Sometimes that's useful. Okay? And the last one that I'll show you is rotate. Right? It's available right here under rotate. When I click on rotate, it'll say select objects. I'll select the objects and hit enter. Right? Then it's going to say specify base point. This is the point around which you want to rotate. So maybe there. Right? And then I can specify a rotation angle, or I could click on the screen where I want it to rotate. So if I want it to be there, for example, I can go ahead and click, and now I've rotated the object. Okay? So you may find that that's useful as well. Okay? So when you're all done for today, right, you're going to go to this little printer icon, and you're going to specify under the printer or plotter, publish to web. Right here, publish to web JPEG. Right? And you can just say use default paper size. Right? Plot area is either display or window. It's up to you. Right? Display will plot what we see. Window allows us to specify on the screen what we want to plot. Right? When I go ahead and say OK, it will bring up a place for me to save it. You'll go to your flash drive. And I'll go ahead and click on Save. And it'll save a JPEG image. That's what you'll post as part of it today. I did not put on here, but you do not need to comment on this exercise. Okay? So you're off the hook for any comments. Are there any questions? All right. I know AutoCAD's a lot to take in. We're going to take it in small steps with a lot of practice. So spend today getting familiar with it. If you already are familiar with it or you've already taken an AutoCAD class, this is completely review for you and you'll breeze right through it. But it's still important for everybody to get at the same page. Okay?